Greetings, Major Taylor Trail Keepers. Thank you again for tuning in with us. This month, I have sitting with me Dr. Carmen I. Ayala. Dr. Ayala has over 40 years experience in education. She recently completed 4 years as State Superintendent for the Illinois State Board of Education, where she served over almost 2 million pre-K through 12 students in almost 4,000 schools and 852 districts across the state. Dr. Ayala has also held positions on numerous boards and committees, including the Illinois State Board of Education Bilingual Advisory Council, the Illinois Women in Educational Leadership, Illinois Resource Center, and the Illinois Professional Review Panel for Evidence-Based Funding. She also served as an executive board member on the Latino Policy Forum, where she championed equitable funding and increased resources for English learners. Throughout her career, Dr. Ayala has received multiple honors, including the 2023 Friend of Education Award from the Illinois Education Association, the 2022 Women of Valor Award from the Simon Wiesenthal Center, the 2020 Puerto Rican Arts Alliance Distinguished Woman Education Award, 2019 Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents, Leaders in Education, Latinx Impact Award, 2018 Leadership Award, and the 2002 Excellence in Education Award from the League of Latin American Citizens, as well as the 2002 Kane County Distinguished Educator Award. So she's got more awards than you can even name. So why am I interviewing her this month? Well, 3 reasons. 1, she's a personal friend of mine. I was like, hey, you got to come on our show. But also because education is another area of concern for our community. And as you know, we've interviewed people from the health industry, mental health industries. So that's the second reason. But then the final reason, the third reason that I'm having Dr. Ayala on the show today is what's not noted in her bio that I just went through is that every place that she has gone, she's been a trailblazer. She's been either the first Latina person of color or the first female in some of the very high positions and high profile positions that she's held. And I'm hoping that she will share with our viewers her journey as an educator and as a trailblazing educator, as well as I'm hoping that maybe she can even give our community members and parents some tips and pointers for things that we can do in the middle of summer to keep our children's reading and math scores up to par. So with that being said, my friend, can I call you Carmen? Is it okay to call you Carmen? Absolutely. All right. So Carmen, can you, I think because we only have 25 minutes, I really want our viewers to hear your story. So can you just kind of walk us through your story? Like where'd you grow up? Where were you, did you grow up with a silver spoon in your mouth? I already know the answers to some of these questions, but I'll ask anyway. Give us your backstory so that everyone can kind of understand your trailblazing journey.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Brenda. Trailblazer. Wow. I don't think it was something I chose in life, but I think it was a vocation in life. My family background is I am one of 4 children. I'm the second oldest. My mother and father came from Puerto Rico when they were young. They met here in the Chicagoland area, got married, had a family, and we moved to the Logan Square area, which is where I predominantly spent my childhood years. They had bought their first home, and we were the first Latino family to move into that in the early 70s.
Wow. Now, and I want to just interject because many of our viewers are very well aware that if you are, Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States, right. But if you are born in Puerto Rico, you are a U.S. citizen because it is a territory. So that's just something I want our viewers to know. So go ahead and finish with the rest of your story. So you were the first Latina family in Logan Square.
And needless to say, we were called lots of racial names, and it had a lot of experiences in school because of the color of our skin.
At the time, was Logan Square predominantly black, white? Predominantly white. Okay.
Like I said, we were the first
Yes.
Latino family to move into the area.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, today, Logan Square is very diverse and a very different place. So I went to school in Lene School in Logan Square. I decided to become a teacher because, in high school I started learning about some of the data. And one of those data points that really, really touched my heart was the high school dropout rate, specifically of our Latino students back in the 80s, right? Mm-hmm. And it's still alive today. There's been some improvement, but so I decided.
Which high school did you graduate from?
I went to Schurz High School.
So you're a product of Chicago Public
Yes.
Schools. So that's something else that her and I have in common. We're both products of Chicago Public Schools. Okay.
So I graduated from Schurz High School, went into teaching, went to Mundelein College, got my teaching degree.
Well, time out.
Uh-huh.
What made you choose teach? Like, did you always know first year that you went to college that you wanted to go into education? What made you choose education as a vocation?
Well, initially,
I'm
I
asking
wanted
all the hard questions. Right?
Initially, I wanted to become a psychiatrist when I was in high school.
Okay.
I was reading Psychology Today when I was in high school, and all these things about Gestalt theory and those kinds of things. But something triggered in my work in church. My parents were always very faith-filled and practiced their faith. And so in church, I worked with Sister Mary Agnes, who was trying to recruit me into religious life.
Okay.
And she mentored me in helping to prepare children for their sacraments, the First Communion, religious education classes, those kinds of things. And I began learning about, as I mentioned, the high school dropout rate. Okay. And that just really tugged at me. And so I, at that point, right around my senior year,
of high school,
decided that I was going to go into education. Okay. I had also heard on the radio that through a federal scholarship opportunity, there was scholarship funding available to have individuals interested in teaching specifically in bilingual education. Okay. The scholarship would, in essence, pay for my education. And since I had to work my way through college, there was no, savings for that. Really, my parents worked very hard to give us what we had. The scholarship really made my college education and my profession in the education, gave it a start through that funding. Okay. But then I became a teacher and started teaching in 1983. So some of you may know that in 1983, the U.S. Department of Ed put out a publication called A Nation at Risk.
Yes.
And, the focus was on our schools are failing this country. And we needed to do something about it. And I ran across so many teachers that were really down on education. But they had invested already, 15 plus years. And I noticed that it reflected in how they engaged with students in the classroom.
When you say teachers that were down on education, unpack that for me. What do you mean when you say you met many teachers that were down on
They
education?
were beat up.
Oh, okay.
They were beat up because, they were,
exhausted.
They were blamed for, the failing schools based upon this A Nation at Risk. And, having been a teacher and having walked in those shoes, and I think our parents realized how hard teachers work due to the experiences we've had with COVID. So I didn't want to find myself being in the profession 15 years and being in that kind of mindset, burning out and all of that. And so I decided I wanted to pursue a master's, and I got an MBA. because I had real estate background. I was selling real estate in my early 20s, putting myself through college and all of that. And so I said, okay, well, here's a field that I'm kind of working part-time in. Let me get an MBA. In high school, going back, I had a goal set for myself when I was a junior. I was taught by a Dr. Hooks. Mm-hmm. He was amazing. I was just so in awe of how he taught and how he encouraged.
He was your teacher in undergrad or in
high school?
Or in high school.
In high school. Okay. And so I said, you know what? I want to have a doctorate behind my name. And so I set a goal that by the time I hit 40, I had to have my doctorate. That was just a personal goal that I set for myself. Okay. So here I am. I have my bachelor's degree. I have this passion for doing something about this dropout rate, right? Mm-hmm. And I walk into education during a very low time with the publication coming out, A Nation at Risk. Yeah. And so my second year into teaching, I entered a program and got my master's, my MBA. But I developed such a love and a passion for education that I'm like, okay, I have this MBA. Now what do I do? And administration was the next step. Okay. I was also starting to experience my passion for equity work and social justice. And
what sparked? Were there any specific events that kind of triggered that passion for the equity work? I'm sure there's a story somewhere.
Well, things like, I was a bilingual teacher in a school. At my first 5 years, I taught in Chicago public schools, and then I moved out into the suburbs. And my classroom was underneath the stairs. Okay? My colleague who taught bilingual education was in what was the old teacher's lounge.
So you weren't even afforded regular classrooms, as if the children weren't worthy of having a regular classroom.
Right. So I really began to see and really understand some of the inequities that were occurring in schools with shifting populations and shifting needs and those kinds of things. And so I decided, I'm kind of tired of people telling me what to do, what to teach, when to teach it. I was very eclectic in my approach and, taught kindergarten. And by springtime, the reading miracle occurred and all of my kindergarten students were reading out of the first grade primer. So, poor children, children of color, it can be done and should be done more. And so I went into administration.
Okay.
And then I went into a program to then get my PhD. I didn't hit it at 40, but I got it at 41.
All right. So when I did your bio, you have a total of 40 years of education experience before you retire. Because you are retired now, right?
Yes, I started when I was 10.
Yeah, right. Of your 40 years, how many of those years would you say were administration work versus classroom teaching?
I was in the classroom for 11 years and 29 years as an administrator.
Okay, so then talk me through some of your trailblazing, because I think once you became an administrator, that's when you started becoming this trailblazer. Am I correct? Mm-hmm. So walk me through your administrative career.
So I was director of the bilingual program in East Aurora, District 131, which was at the time the fourth largest EL program, English learner program in the entire state.
Yes. No acronyms for our viewers.
Yes, I'll try to define them. We're really good at acronyms. Yeah. And, I would address some things. For example, in staffing, there was the director of elementary education, and I was the director of bilingual education, and we worked very closely together. But we did our staffing separately, and I started putting the two together. And what I learned was our bilingual classrooms were overcrowded and stretched, and yet there was recommendations to hire more non-bilingual classrooms with lower class sizes. Wow. So we each presented our staffing requests separately. I combined the data, and it clearly showed some inequities. And when I presented that information in a cabinet level meeting to the superintendent, I said, why is it that the bilingual classrooms are sitting with 35, 39, 40 students? The general education classrooms have 20, 16, and yet we're still seeking more general education staff. The population is shifting and changing, and the data doesn't lie.
Right.
And so I can't tell you the number of times I said to myself, they're going to fire me. But with the data, it's clear you have to bring it forward and speak the truth, right? And so that was a very early experience that I had. I later became assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction for, I think it's the 5th largest district in the state currently. And I was the first Latina at the central office level. And it was in a district that was growing leaps and bounds.
Right.
We were, in my first 5 years there, I helped to open 9 schools.
Right.
And that's where we met.
That's where we met. We're not going to say the name of that district, though.
No,
right. Yeah,
right.
right. Yeah.
So that's where we met.
Yes.
And I was a part of the diversity initiative for that district because, for example, in the 1990s, the district was predominantly white.
Right.
Fast forward that about 20 years, and the population was drastically changing because a lot of homes were being built and the families coming in were more black and brown families.
Right.
And so one of the very first things I was faced with was from the Board of Education, the statement, these children coming into our district are pulling our test scores down.
Yes.
So I engaged with a data analysis expert, and we looked at the data.
Who might that have been?
And well, they did a full report and investigation. And actually what the data showed was that the students that had been in the district since kindergarten were actually the ones that were having an impact on the test scores, the decline in the test scores. And we engaged in an equity audit in that district and had a full equity plan. And we also did some intensive curriculum alignment because the boundaries in the schools were changing every year because we were building so many schools. And so a child would get this unit at this school, move and get the same unit at the next school because there wasn't an aligned system-wide curriculum. And so with that tight alignment and the cultural responsiveness that we did, and I started collecting the data. It was during No Child Left Behind. You had to disaggregate your data by different groups. And to give you an example, in 2006, our black students were the lowest performing in both reading and math in comparing to 4 other unit districts that were in our proximity, one of which was a more affluent district.
Right.
So we engaged in that intensive, very focused, very intentional systemic work. And by 2010, the black students had surpassed, in terms of growth, the data had surpassed the achievement and had closed the gaps in comparison to those other 4 districts. One of them, actually, the gaps were actually going in the wrong direction. And so I have lots of stories.
Because I happen to have, and I'm okay if we disclose it. I was that data person that was doing the analysis for you, and so I have to, even though I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it. If my memory serves me correctly, when you first started on that journey, I thought people had made statements that if we focused on closing the achievement gap, it was going to hurt our white students. At the end of that tenure in time, when the black students had outperformed some of the neighboring districts, how were our white students doing? Was the growth? So I guess my question is, was the achievement of the black students at the expense of the white students? What did the data show us?
Okay, so yes, there was a public statement made that, all of these diversity initiatives are being done at the expense of our white students. And so when, right before I finished my tenure in the district and decided to move on to my next role, the data actually showed that even the white students were outperforming and had grown substantially.
Which shows that when you pull up our lowest performing students, everybody wins and everybody benefits.
It's about all.
Get that. I mean, the story there. I wish we could name the district, but that is a story that should be told over and over again and should be replicated over and over again. That when you help the least of these, everybody wins. No one is losing because we're helping pull up the achievement of a particular group that has a need. So now we only have about 4 or 5 minutes left, and I want us to. So I'm gonna skip over and fast forward because I want to get to your last position and then to where you are now. And I want to do all of that in less than 3 minutes. So
we'll try.
Because you made history in your last position as state superintendent, but I want you to talk, because I know the story. You were getting ready to retire, but I don't want to give it away. I want you to tell the story of how the events that happened that led to you becoming the state superintendent, and then if you can also in like less than 45 seconds or a minute, talk about how you served during probably our nation's most difficult time of COVID. And I'm going to be quiet because I want you to tell the story.
Okay.
I don't want to tell it. You tell it.
So I then became district superintendent.
Okay.
And you mentioned, we need to replicate and we need to, and that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
We did the
so
audit.
You were replicating what had happened in that other district when you became the superintendent for another. Okay. And did you have the same?
And so benchmarked and basically outperformed within 3 years. Our growth was greater than the comparable districts that we were measuring against.
Okay.
And so it is possible. It was a very different district, smaller district, elementary district versus a unit district, very large, fast growing. So I don't know how it happened.
Oh boy.
But before I can stop and say, I don't know if I want to do this, because I was getting ready to retire back in 2018.
Yeah. Because you had 36 years of service at that time.
Yeah. Right. And so I got the phone call, Carmen, we want you to be, to consider being a candidate to become the next state superintendent of education. Never in my wildest dreams. Yeah. And, I submitted my application, but, I was thinking, I don't want to do this. And before I can pull back, the train had left the station, and I became the first woman and the first Latina woman of color in the history of the Illinois State Board of Education to be the state superintendent of education. And so I just thought, oh my God, what a responsibility, what an honor. I met so many young ladies in high school and middle school who were like, you're such a role model, and parents. And I just took that very seriously, and I had to pinch myself several times to believe.
What year did you take the helm?
2019.
So then... so you took the helm as state superintendent. Was it July 1 of 20?
No, it was officially March 1st
of 2019. So then fast forward a year later, March of 2020, COVID hit.
Right.
So because I can remember you had all these wonderful plans of things you were going to replicate what you had done at the district level for our state.
Yeah, to some degree.
So, and I know we only have a few minutes, but what were some of the challenges in your role, if you had to pick maybe one of your biggest challenges as state superintendent, aside from COVID, obviously that threw a monkey wrench in everyone's life? What was your biggest challenge as state superintendent during that time, and then what's one of your biggest accomplishments that you're proud of? And then we'll probably wrap up at that. But those two nuggets.
Okay. So obviously the pandemic was, nobody had the playbook on it. We were kind of flying, learning how to fly the plane, as they would say, while we were in the air, so to speak. That was difficult. No matter what decisions were made, no matter how we communicated, it didn't matter what we did. We just couldn't really make people happy. And it was just the fear, the frustration, the division that began to develop within schools and communities, within the state. That was a very difficult time. That was very challenging.
So what are you most proud of? Because we've got like 1 minute left. Okay. What is one of your biggest accomplishments? And then I want to end on what nuggets of advice would you give to our families that are viewing for it's summertime. It's almost the end of July. What can they do to help work with their children at home? But what's your biggest accomplishment that you're proud of as State Sup first? Give me that.
So in spite of the pandemic, in spite of, all of the challenges, equity is and will be my passion. We developed an Equity Journey Continuum that is publicly posted on every single district report card that really tells the community where that district is in terms of student learning, the learning environment, and the educators.
And that is still there even today?
And that is still there
good.
Even today. To hold districts accountable and to communicate why there are gaps between different groups of students or among different groups of students, because we have got to close those gaps, and it can be done.
And that anyone can go to, any of our viewers can go to the site and look for that Illinois State Report Card, and it'll come right up. So then, can you give our viewers some nuggets? What would you tell the average, just everyday parents? It's summertime. What are some things they can do with their children at home to keep them
So I'll go back to my parents. They were very hardworking. My mother didn't quite speak the English language, but they had some very high expectations for us in terms of education. Every single one of my siblings has a college degree. I have a PhD, and I have a sister who has 2 master's degrees. So the expectation and the really making sure we had perfect attendance most of our years in school. That's critical. And making sure that they are meeting with teachers and that teachers know that they are their child's advocate.
So those are things they can do during the school year. What are some things they can do during the summer months when they're not in session, just to keep their kids,
Keeping their students, keeping their children active. Monitoring that screen time. Okay. That is something I didn't experience as a child, but today the amount of time on screens is really having an impact on our students.
Okay. All right, so Dr.
And read books. Read.
All right, so that's Dr. Ayala, and she says turn off the TV, turn off the cell phones, and have your children with the book. This is the next to the last show for the Major Taylor Trail Keepers. Next month will be our last show. And actually, it will be Dr. Ayala reversing roles, and she'll be interviewing me for our year in review with the Major Taylor Trail Keepers. It has been a blast. Dr. Ayala, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. And thank you for sharing the nuggets of wisdom for what our parents can do during the summer. Read with your children. Turn off the TV. Turn off the cell phones. And once the school year starts, you're saying stay engaged with the teachers and make sure that kiddos are in attendance. So that's all. Signing off for the month of August. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.